So greetings. Today we're going to explore the philanthropic sector in Australia. We're going to challenge some of the core aspects that we believe should be improved and offer some solutions to that. My name is Gary Scallon. I'm the founder of Future Australian Impact Foundation, and I really look forward to sharing our thoughts with you and hopefully some solutions to how we can make our sector more effective, raise significantly more capital in a more sustainable way, and make the world a better place. Our partners at Future Australian Impact Foundation, I'll refer to that as FAIF from now on, are all champions in their own right out of financial services and philanthropy, and we all share the same vision to make a significant difference in our world. And I hope you'll enjoy the next few podcasts with us. Essentially, just in summarising our philanthropic sector, we have over 60,000 registered charities. Seems really crazy in our small country to have so many. We have duplications everywhere. We have incredible people doing amazing work, and yet so much of it's duplicated. And unfortunately, what that means is that donors realise that with the best will in the world and all this incredible work that's been done, the fact is that the vast majority of money raised then goes to, in the vast majority of charities, then goes to the administration and the running of the charities as opposed to the intended beneficiaries. Obviously, that's a challenge, and we certainly don't have any negative feeling around that because we really are in awe of all the people working in the sector. Basically, angels doing wonderful work, working with an outdated, old-fashioned model of asking people with money for money on a never-ending cycle, a never-ending treadmill, in which I just refer to as the begging bowl. So constantly, whether we're at sausage sizzles or cake sales or beach runs or swims or a wonderful cricket match every year, the reality of it is that we're all using the same model, chasing the same money, same pool of people, and we know there's a desperate need, a never insatiable need for more money as our society changes and as we have this major need to help others. We all share that desire, and we've come up with a few ideas as to how we believe we can make a difference. Essentially, FAIF is positioned, even though we are an ACNC-registered DGR charity, we position to support other charities raise significantly more money, more capital, and also deploy this more effectively, and in the process help millions of people, both in Australia and in time globally. So today, just looking at some of the stats in our industry, I've already mentioned in our sector that we have over 60,000 charities. The vast majority of these are smaller charities, basically in survival mode. Very many of them are not sustainable, and we'd like to, in time, as part of our strategy, we believe that it's absolutely imperative that we consolidate and that the industry consolidates in these different sectors to work together, not to change our brand, not to change all the special sauce and the magnificence that each person working within charity brings and offers, but rather to standardize, collaborate, consolidate all the back office, which really is not unique to philanthropy at all things like administration, accounting, legal documents, employment of people, rental of premises, etc. So we believe that all of those can quite easily be consolidated amongst charities that share the same values, share the same sectors, and that seems to make sense that we at least consolidate and in the process reduce the individual costs that every charity has, all these common costs, whilst keeping separate from that all the fantastic branding, all the hard work that's been done, all the magnificence of the individual people helping people in need. So consolidation of the sector we see as absolutely imperative for the success and for the intended doubling in philanthropy, which I think from government to all our major charities, our wonderful family offices, our foundations, all the people working within the sector, we all share the same desire and vision to, at a very least, to double the current philanthropic capital that comes into the sector. Outside of government, there's about $14 billion in round figures, and it's quite feasible that, given the wonderful advantages we have as Australians and in our magnificent country, that we should be able to give a whole lot more. Our belief is just simply is that the reason people don't give more is not because the intent isn't good. We know that, of course, that there are significant tax benefits to donating, as there should be, and through DGR status, FAIF, along with all other charities who have DGR status, are able to issue tax-deductible invoices for donors. And, of course, that's, a major reason, of course, why many people do donate, but we like to think that mostly the donations are given from the heart for good purpose and for good reason. And so we've designed and come up with some groundbreaking, innovative models, which we believe will provide the charities and the market, and specifically donors, with, let's say, better and more sustainable options other than the traditional begging bowl of please give more money. Because we know that next year we have to come back as a charity. All charities go back to their donors on this ever-repeating, never-ending cycle in this treadmill. And we're hoping to disrupt that positively, respectfully. We're hoping to collaborate with any and every registered charity to assist them through our new models to raise more capital in a more sustainable manner, and in time to deploy that in a more effective manner. And in that way, of course, we'll all make a massive difference, which is our end game. So some of the ideas that we have around innovation is at the moment we've got donations that are once-off, ever-repeating, and therefore we don't believe sustainable. Either the donor gets fatigue, runs out of that, or the patriarch or matriarch in a big foundation or family office decides that they're not going to keep giving to that same charity. The charities live in this constant uncertainty of what their revenue and their income is going to be. And that's, of course, not ideal at all. It's very difficult to run a business based on that. The stress levels in charities across the board are really significant. It's a never-ending need to raise capital, to dream up new ideas, to come up with new concepts as to how they would go and ask people for money. About 30% of all people working in philanthropy are volunteers. Again, wonderful people, mostly angels, doing work for no remuneration whatsoever. And 2/3 of the people working in this very large sector are paid. And quite rightly, of course. We know that something, anything, whether it's a business or anything else, has to be financially sustainable or viable to be sustainable. And we can't constantly just rely on people's goodwill and doing work for nothing. Most of the people working within philanthropy, of course, as with all of us, would require income to survive, and as such, we don't see any harm whatsoever in paid employment, and we believe that that's needed. And the way we can address that and become more effective as a sector, we believe, is just simply that we would consolidate back offices, standardize them, and in the process reduce overheads, while at the same time offering donors significantly more attractive and sustainable ways in which they can contribute to society, to the social need, to their nominated charity, etc. The first one that we've come up with is a sustainable and self-sustaining donation. So exactly the same concept, where funds are given to a charity, in our case to FAIF, with DGR status. A tax invoice is issued to the donor, and instead of the funds flowing directly through to the charity, we would invest a portion of the funds, in round figures, about 2/3 of the investment, into a major institution, into multiple portfolios, where we mitigated risk, which produced a fixed interest, fixed outcome for a fixed period. And in the process, that portion that we invested would go back and grow back, regenerate itself through fixed income, compounding interest, the most simple of all investment strategies, back up to the original amount. In the interim, that would release 30 or 35% to the charity, And we know that then as this capital amount regenerates itself, it would mean that every cycle, in this case at current interest rates, about 4.5 years, you would get the regeneration of the funds back up to the original amount, and we would repeat the process. In a further cycle, we would reissue 30% back to the charity and reinvest approximately 65%. It's rate dependent. If interest rates were down, we'd invest slightly more, maybe up to 70 or 72%, in order to ensure that the cycle wasn't too long and could be repeated indefinitely. And the result of that particular one is that we just called that as a legacy donation as opposed to an outright donation. So in summary, exactly the same tax deductions, but a concept whereby the charity receives approximately 30% in cycles on an ever-repeating basis indefinitely. So completely sustainable, donatable money. And after three of those cycles, of course, the charity will now start receiving more money than the original donation. So we see that as a very viable addition to the current standard donations. Our third one would be loans and sponsorships, basically the same financial structure in which corporates, individuals, foundations, high net worth individuals donate an amount of money to the charity, could sponsor them, could loan an amount, not donate, loan an amount. We would use the same financial structure. Essentially, 2/3 of the capital that was loaned would be invested into an independent, major financial institutional portfolio with fixed income over a fixed period on the basis that the returns are quantifiable, the outcome is known, and essentially 65% grows back to 100, and the loan would then be repaid. So the lender would have the option, or the sponsor would have the option to either roll that over. The huge advantages on the lender's side would simply be that the asset stays and the funds stay on their balance sheet. They have greater insight and greater impact on the charity because they have sight of what their loan has been used for. The charity gets a significant portion, 30%. It's a known amount, knowing that the loan will be self-liquidating, that the financial portfolio that we structure would then repay the lender. So win-win for both parties. The charity gets money it may not have had. It's quite clearly, in our opinion, certainly it's highly likely that it's easier to give a large loan than it is to give a large donation. The donation goes back to the original concerns we have with the current model and the standard model, where once a donation is given and it's gone, inevitably the charity will come back to the donor again in this never-ending repeating cycle. Whereas in the loan, the lender is far more involved. They know they have a loan. The asset stays on their balance sheet. They retain the value of that effectively, and they know that they will be repaid. Whereas on the charity side, there's a known amount. It's not the full amount of the loan, but it does mean that they don't have the obligation to repay the lender because the investment portion of this, or what we call the capital portfolio of the loan, then is self-liquidating and will repay the lender. If the relationship's good with the lender, between the lender and the charity utilizes the funds as intended for maximum impact for its beneficiaries and for its charity, then there's obviously an opportunity to communicate really well with the lender and the charity, and that when the money matures and gets repaid or is able to be repaid to the lender, that they then have the option of rolling over that loan again. So we believe that lending, and in this case sponsorship, and that could be highly valuable in major corporates and high net worths and foundations and high net worth people who are really wanting to support a charity in a more sustainable way or a cause. And we think of many of the sports, the disabilities, the communities, etc., that people would want to support, but just perhaps don't have the best model. And we think that the loan/sponsorship model, which is self-liquidating, is very viable and should attract significantly more capital for your charities. And the third one, An innovation that we've come up with is an in-specie donation. We've pursued this significantly. We've got tax opinion, and we will shortly announce and be very specific in some of the upcoming podcasts on how in-specie donations can make a very significant difference to our charitable and philanthropic sector. And fourth, we also have asset optimization, where we've come up with a model, which we're in the process of refining at the moment, whereby all the dormant assets within our charitable sectors. We know, for example, that 20-odd% of all registered charities and not-for-profits have a religious connotation, belong to our different various religious groups. Many of these are underperforming and completely dormant and non-generating assets. And just an example of one of those would be churches, for example, synagogues, mosques, whatever they may be. We've got these fantastic assets, often properties that are bequeathed to charities that are totally non-income producing. In fact, in many cases, of course, if they fix property, they'd be requiring and costing money to maintain, whether that be the gardening or the maintenance of building, etc. And we've designed a asset optimization structure whereby we arrange external loans to the charity and utilize our financial structuring again to ensure that a portion of that's in a capital portfolio which regenerates back up to the original full amount of the loan, and including interest, and gets repaid to the lender. So in our terminology, that would be a self-liquidating loan, and in the interim, the beneficiary or the borrower then is able to access at least 25 to 30% of the value of the loan without the liability of then needing to repay the loan. So it's a self-liquidating, self-regenerating loan to charities. In that case, there's no tax deductibility because the loan, of course, still belongs to the lender and the asset still belongs to the lender. The charity is able to issue at a very low value to loan ratio, could issue, for example, 20% of whatever the building's value was, could borrow that money and issue the investment portion of the loan, seed that back to the lender so that the lender has an extremely low risk loan. Its security would consist of a first mortgage with a very low loan to value ratio, plus an investment portfolio that has capital protection, fixed income return over a limited period, something like 5 or 6 years, and it will completely self-liquidate and repay the loan without the obligation on the charity to be funding or repaying a loan. So those are some of the ideas, and in the weeks ahead and the podcasts ahead, we're going to explore each of those in detail, and we look forward to being of service to you. So welcome to our series, and thank you for listening.